to this. Now we're recording, folks. I'm going to do my share the screen. We're going to bring up the presentation. I got to click this, and there we go. Awesome. So we'll start in right now. Matt, if you need to chime in as my my god here, by all means, please do that. That'd be great. As I said earlier, Matt will jump in at the end to help us with the group settings to get everybody structured. We'll get you in there. You guys will assign team leaders to kind of keep everybody on track, to help people with their activities through the course of the week. And hopefully, as this course evolves, we start to accumulate all these points that are really the seeds of your business going forward. What you did last week, what you do this week, next week will be reflected in your business in 30, 60, 90 days, and in your income in 90 to 120, 180 days going forward. So today's course is a system to work with buyers. I developed this course probably 20 odd years ago. So I've taught it for essentially 20 years. There's some sections in here. They're not COVID friendly, of course. We're in the COVID environment. And by the way, happy Health Day today. This is the World Health Day every year globally. There's a bit of a spike, I think, right now in the COVID cases. So please, my heartfelt wishes is everybody stay safe out there, wear your masks, wash your hands, don't take any risks that are unnecessary. Practice every one of the guidelines that the government's providing for us. So today's system, we're going to look at some surveys, some research that's looking into buyer habits, some studies of what realtors do as far as their follow-up systems. We're going to look at some buyer interview scenarios, and we'll look at some of the high-level kind of do's and don'ts when you work with buyers from a regulatory and legal standpoint. So hopefully it's a helpful session. My guess is that the vast majority of the realtors that are in this course right now with us are primarily working with buyers, which is no problem. It's great. It's awesome. Next week will be on listings, which there's an old saying called list to last, but let's go with buyers right now. Let's say probably right now, 80% of your work is probably with buyers. And of course, with buyers, it takes a lot more time to sell a buyer. You're looking at anywhere between 3 to 4 times the amount of time to take a buyer from the introduction to the completion of the sale. The folder or file I gave you last week, the Excel file, will show that it takes on average about 32, call it to 40 hours to work with the buyers in today's market versus 8 to 12 hours with a seller from start to finish. So what I would be suggesting is you evolve your business over time, where maybe you have a balance in your buyers and sellers of 50-50, or if you even make your seller ratio 70% or higher, it's the inventory on the shelf for you to develop your business. So our first slide today is the 3 big influences on real estate. So we're going to be using our book. So you either have the book or you have a digital file on your computer, and we've got some fill in the blanks for you. As I said before, I think we learn best by writing, engaging, and using our hand by printing into our book. So the first big influence on Canadian real estate, if we look at it, and this comes from StatsCan, would be immigration. So 54%, according to StatsCan, of the Canadian population will be foreign born by 2030. Now, we're going to have a tsunami of immigration happening once the COVID vaccine is deployed across the country. Once we have herd immunity here, we're looking at probably 400,000 to 500,000 people coming to Canada, of which probably 60+% of those will reside in the GTA. So this is an amazing opportunity for us as professionals right now to get into the thinking mind of focusing on immigration and new immigrants to the country. So you may want to align yourself with those service providers that are recruiters, HR people, lenders, lawyers, so that you can connect with them and potentially build yourself a pipeline of those new immigrants coming to the country, because they're coming here without any knowledge. It's a big move, big change, and they're looking for people that they can that can support them and their family or whatever. If it's just themselves coming to the country, support them so that they know that they're taken care of. Another big influence is great news. We're living longer. Our lifespan has increased. The current mortality rate in Canada is 81. Looking back, 50 years ago, that would have been in the 60-ish range, like 68, 69. So we're getting healthier. We're living longer. So there's going to be, opportunities for us to focus in on those types of people that, are going to be needing inventory and purchasing products that, their 2-story, 3,000 square foot home may not accommodate them anymore at 78, 80, 81. So they're transitioning maybe to, a bungalow, to a condo. So it's a segment of the market, if you look at that mature market, that you may want to support. You may want to add that as a pipeline. And number 3 would be what we call the echo boom generation. Essentially, these are the children of the baby boom generation. So the baby boom generation are those children that were born after the Second World War. So from, say, 1946 up to about 1967, 68. These 2 cohorts in Canada reflect the largest population base that we have in the country. The echo boom generation represents those folks that are 18 to 31 years of age. Currently in Canada, there's about 9.2 million of them. The average first-time buyer, incidentally, is about 31 years old. So, the first-time buyer echo boom generation, they're pretty huge. They're a big influencer now in our marketplace. Approximately half of them, although this stat was done a few years back, I would kind of say this has increased a little bit because of COVID. But let's just go with the stat from a few years back. Approximately half of them do live with their parents. And 42% of them that are couples in this cohort do not have children. What I find fascinating about this generation is they're very educated. They've lived and grown up in the digital world. So communicating to this group and this cohort is going to be different, for instance, in communicating to the baby boom generation or the pre-baby boom generation, who like face-to-face, they like tangible things, they like to see paper. Whereas the echo boom generation, they're just as good with the text. In fact, the best way for me to communicate to my 2 kids is not by the phone, by picking up and calling their number. It's by texting them or doing a FaceTime with them through Facebook. So these are the 3 big kind of target audiences that hopefully, you've thought about where you want to target, or maybe you target all 3 of them. It's up to you. But these are some things just to consider about where we can generate buyers going forward. Our next slide. How often do salespeople follow up? Now, this was done. A study was done of all of us as salespeople, and what they found was some fascinating statistics here. So, believe it or not, as salespeople, one of our worst talents is not following up as an industry at whole. I'm not saying this about Signature Post. 48% of salespeople never follow up on a lead. As if you recall from last week, I said, what's your job? What do you do? Well, we wake up every morning unemployed. Therefore, our job is to go find somebody to employ us. Well, that's done by prospecting. That's generating leads. So you generate a lead, and in the sales industry, up to 48%. So half of the salespeople you're competing with don't even follow up, which I find remarkable, shocking actually. So think about that for a second. We always say there's 60,000 realtors we're competing against in the Toronto Real Estate Board, or some number similar to that. Well, that statistic of 48%, let's just round it up and say 50, that means 30,000 of those people are not even real competition to you. They're not following up. So stroke that right out of your mind, that there's not really 60,000 people that you're worried about. You're worried about perhaps 30,000. In that 30,000, not all of them are realtors, of course. In that 30,000, some of them are appraisers, some of them are, do other functions. They work for lenders and things, and they're using the data to do their job. Next statistic says 25% will contact the prospect twice and then stop. And that's maybe because the prospect outsold them as far as why they shouldn't be using you as the realtor. So 25% make 2 contacts and stop. So we'll call that 73%. Next is 12% make 3 contacts and stop, which means that 85% of salespeople make 3 or less contacts and stop with the prospect, which is quite shocking when you see the next statistic in next slide, which is when do people buy, sell, or refer? Well, very few buy on the first contact. Only 2% do. 3% buy in the second contact because they're getting warmed up to the thought of buying something, in particular for us, a big transaction called real estate. So 3% on the second contact, 5% on the third contact, 10% on the fourth contact. So 20% of all buying will occur in the first to fourth contact. But here's the big stat that we all have to burn into our brain. 80% of all consumers, whether they buy real estate, they buy a car, whether they buy a vacation somewhere, whatever they're buying, they buy that product service on the 5th and 12th contact, which, if we're not there, as we saw in the last slide, 50% of people don't even reply to a lead. If we're not there engaged, then we're missing out on the opportunities of when people buy, sell, or refer. Because here's what stops that buying process, referring process, and selling process. Well, 1% occurs because, sadly, of people passing away. 3% people do move away and they haven't engaged you. 5% buy from a friend. Well, lots of friends are getting into real estate right now. So in your database, you may have, some competition that you weren't aware of with those people in your database of their friend or former coworker has now gotten into the industry. 9% do buy from a competitor. We do have a lot of those, and they're not going to stop. We're going to, forever be facing competitors in our industry. 14% buy strictly based on price. Now, I know probably you're sitting there going, hey, I don't believe that's higher than that. And it may be in some market segments, but here's what I have to say. Price in any type of context, regardless of what you're buying, people will pay for value. So if you do not show value, if you don't convey or communicate value to your prospect, to your client, to your customer, then you're a commodity, as I mentioned to you last week. So they're going to just look at you as one of those 60,000 people. But if you differentiate yourself, if you set yourself apart from the masses, people will see that. They'll perceive that value, and people are prepared, believe it or not, to pay for that value. I actually saw this year a listing come across my desk from one of our realtors here in the West office where they charged or assessed a fee of 7%. I thought it was a mistake. I thought it said 0.7, which I was going to have a conversation with our realtor about that, but it said 7%. So that realtor obviously conveyed their value to that consumer, to that seller, to convey or to generate that 7% listing. 68% is the next statistic for what they call perceived indifference. And what we have there in brackets, you do not care because you are not in touch with them. So, you get the sale or you've, warmed up a relationship with them. You did all your activities this 5-6 weeks we're going to be together here in the summit. And then you just disappeared because you weren't getting something immediately in return. So in the mind of the consumer, they think, hey, you really didn't care. And that's why you're not in touch with them going forward. So that's a big theme in a lot of people's minds, a lot of consumers' minds. Hey, we just don't care. All we care about is our own pocketbook. Past client survey from NAR. 15,000 home buyers were surveyed 2 years after their purchase. This is a very important survey. This was done a number of years ago. Here's what they said, or here's what they found. 94% of those home buyers were very satisfied with their realtor service. So as I said, I got to move my mouse over here, I think. Yep. 94% were very satisfied with their realtor service. This is where we pat ourselves on the back because as I said last week to you, I believe that all of us, when we do get that buyer, we do get that seller, we're really delivering exceptional service in the moment, the current service level. So they are very satisfied with your service. However, 36% could not remember their realtor's name after 2 years. How is that possible? But an 88% of them would use or refer that realtor. Well, the 36 couldn't remember their names of the realtor who they were very satisfied, 94% of them were. It's because they didn't stay in touch. They did the deal, they made the sale, they got paid, and then they walked away and disappeared. Back to that perceived indifference. We don't care. And it may not be that way. I struggled with this in my career, where I didn't stay in touch with people, and it may have been a year or two where I had not contacted somebody that I'd sold a property to. And the guilt that I had and the fear that I had of reaching down for that phone, picking that phone up and calling them with this mindset that they're going to be angry, upset with me. And boy, oh boy, I better not do that because I don't want to get yelled at and I want to, embarrass myself. But I would struggle with that, and I would pick that phone up and I'd reach out, dial the number, or hit the button to call them. And the pleasurable phone call that would ensue every time. There was never a bad one. Every time it was a great conversation. They were so happy that I had engaged them. So if you're sitting there right now and you have a whole bunch of folks in your database that you haven't reached out to in a long time, please just pick up the phone, make it happen, call them, and you're going to have a positive experience. You're going to have a positive experience. It's not going to be bad. And if it is bad, better to know it today than to worry about it next week, next month, next year, that you have these people and you see their listing come up on the market with somebody else. Better to find that out today. I always wanted to get bad news sooner than later, but I'm telling you, it's not going to be bad news. They're going to be so appreciative. Why? Because you sold them the house as the buyer, where they're now making memories and dreams come true. And if it was 2 years, 3 years ago, the equity they built in that home is amazing. So if you're sitting there, as I said, you got all these folks in your database where you haven't called them, please pick up the phone, reach out. Don't do it by, stealth and send them an email or send them, a letter. Pick up the phone and give them a call. It'd be well worth it. Our next slide. Let's go back to systems. Systems, as I said last week, hated having them, but they're so essential. I use the term McDonaldize your business because I'd seen that in a presentation before. You have to have these systems in your business. Why? Well, it's critical. We have to be effective and efficient to function in this business. We have to be able to manage our business, and especially with buyers, the time that we're engaging and investing in each individual buyer. And in this market right now, folks, my heart goes out to you guys that are in competition where there's 20, 30, 40, 50 offers on every property. If we don't have these systems in place when we're dealing with these ongoing multiple offer situations, we're going to go crazy, and we don't want that to happen. So we have to have these systems to be effective and efficient to manage your business. Going back to last week's 6 C's, and we'll just bring them back up here for you to burn these 6 concepts into your mind. It's the contacting system. How are we generating leads with buyers? Well, we identified already earlier today, there could be 3 big cohorts of buyers. There could be, the immigrant buyer, new to the country. We can have the echo boom generation. We can have the baby boom generation and the post or pre Second World War generation. Or you can even throw my generation in there. It's called Generation X. We're kind of the lost boys and girls generation. We want to communicate with people. We're not communicating, then we're not engaging. We're not developing relationships. We're not seeding what we need to seed for future business. We got to develop that method. How are we going to do it? My advice to you, once we're out of COVID, face-to-face as much as you can. People are going to be needing that. They're going to be wanting that. They're going to be craving seeing people, human engagement. As of right now, use video as much as you can. Use the phone as much as you can. The method of using letters, personal notes, that's going to be good. But I think people in this current COVID world, we're going to want to hear a voice or see your face on the video. Determine the frequency. We talked about that last week. Could look like 32 to 36 times a year. You're going to want to stay in touch with people. That's too much for you. That's fine. Make it 20, 24 times. That'd be twice a week, or sorry, twice a month. No problem. And you always want to be educating folks on what it is that you're there for. We talked about the words of real estate. We're going to change some of those words. Hopefully some of you did that exercise that I offered you to do, which was to create your elevator speech, right? So educating people through that elevator speech would be a great step for you to use to communicate with folks. Converting folks into a contract, well, and booking appointments. I taught you guys last week, and hopefully you've been practicing it. The alternative choice close and the sharp close, using those two together are a powerful 1-2 punch to getting appointments booked. And for us as buyers, working with the buyers, we want to CETO them. I introduced you to that concept last week. CETO, of course, standing for come into office. Right now, we can't come into the office, but we will get back to that world very soon. But we want to be able to get that prospect, that buyer in front of us so that we can quickly assess whether they have the capability and capacity to purchase real estate. Number 4 was the contract in the 6 C's. Sign them up as a client or customer, but my recommendation would be a client. Why? Because we are now engaging them in our fiduciary responsibility. That's our loyalty. That's our confidence, being obedient to them, providing full accounting to them, acting in good faith. This is what we want. We want them to see us in action as a client relationship. So in the buyer perspective, of course, we're looking for you to get them engaged in a buyer representation agreement. As a former arbitrator with TREB, and I help run arbitration with Mississauga Real Estate Board, I cannot impress upon you enough how important it is, folks, to get a buyer representation agreement signed and fill it out completely. Going to go off a little topic here, but in the buyer agency agreement, there's two very important, well, lots of very important sections, but the two that I see, or three that I see people make mistakes on quite often, is the geography. I often see folks putting in GTA, stands for Greater Toronto Area. Folks, do not put that in. Be specific. If you're going to be working in Peel Region, you can put in Peel Region, or you can narrow it down and say Mississauga, Brampton, Caledon, Oakville. Be specific, because GTA in court is not going to hold up as a geographic location for you. And you're going to want to put in the type of property as well. It could be single family residence, could be detached, could be condo. Be specific there. And please, please, I implore you, on the section that it says for your commission, your fee, because we're using the word fee now in this course. Hey, Mike, commission, as Michael Stothers came in to get me off my game. In the fee section, we're going to want to put in a fee, because if you leave that blank, folks, and we do have to take that contract to court, you get a goose egg, you get nothing. So we're going to have to put something in there. And please do not put in the language in that section as per MLS, because we do have situations on MLS where you're getting paid 1 cent or $1. And certainly for all the work you're going to be doing with these buyers, we don't want that scenario to unfold. So number 5 is our cash in. This is getting paid. This is what we're here for, because we're not running charities, we're running real businesses. Number 6, charting, following up and keeping in touch with everybody. This is an important part of what we do. This is the post-sale process, and we looked at that in your assessment last week. How good are you in the medium and long term keeping in touch with your clients? And so I asked the question here, what are the benefits to you and the buyer by having systems for these foundational elements? Well, I've given you a couple up top, right? Effective, efficient. But how about let's throw in, after my talk about the buyer agency contract, stay out of trouble, right? Because now you've actually legally engaged that buyer in a contract where it's not unilateral. This contract is bilateral. It's between us as a brokerage and the buyer. And so if the buyer does something to contravene that, there's complications that could arise from that. There's consequences that can arise from that. So it's very important, folks. I can't impress upon you enough how important it is to get these contracts signed so you protect yourself and you engage folks legally and professionally in that client relationship. Next slide. Sources of buyers for lead generation. Well, we talked last week a lot about sphere of influences and our sphere of relationships, and we'll go through that a little bit in another slide. Proactive open houses. Now, sadly, folks, we can't do open houses right now. But let's pretend that we live in a world right now where we can do proactive open houses. And what does that mean? Well, proactive means you're doing something to generate traffic to that open house. And that does not mean that you show up at 5 to 1 for your 1 to 4 o'clock open house, put 5 or 6 signs up in the neighborhood, and hope for the best that people are going to come in. Or you may be sitting there going, I hope nobody does show up because I'm not prepared. Let's not put you in that position. Let's put you in a position where you're being proactive. So that could be some flyers before the open house. So maybe the Wednesday or Thursday, you send some flyers in the neighborhood, because if it's a good neighborhood or even just a average neighborhood, people are going to want to move there. And a lot of people that live there, they have friends or family that come into the area. And by dropping a flyer off, letting them know that there's an open house, and you may even want to tailor make those flyers to say there's a VIP pre-open house from 12 to 1 for the neighbors. So you make an exclusive type of open house just for the neighbors, which would be pretty cool. Social media, you can use all kinds of social media content to promote your open houses. So doing something proactive with your open houses to increase the likelihood that you're going to have traffic is so critical. I say proactive, web-based, same stuff, right? We're going to want to push content out there in social and in the internet space so that you're constantly, ranking higher in the social searches on Google and whatnot. Social networking. This is getting out there and just getting yourself known. Maybe it's joining the real estate board. Maybe it's joining a committee. Maybe it's volunteering somewhere, but getting out there socially so that you're networking with folks. And as I suggested last week, find those things that you really enjoy. For me, it happened to be hockey and baseball. So I was in those environments as a coach, as a sponsor, as a member of the executive, but I also went to a lot of the social elements that would be hosted there. Traditional advertising. This is very expensive, folks. And it's quite frankly, as you probably guess in your own property, when you receive some of these flyers, you pitch them right away into the recycling bin. But as a source of generating leads, it still does work. If you specifically target a neighborhood for buyers, for sellers, it can work, but it does cost a lot of money. It does take a lot of time, does take a lot of effort. And it's not in my opinion, not the best method of doing things. Cold calls, warm calls. Cold calls are people that you're reaching out to that you have they've expressed absolutely no interest in working or buying real estate. So it's a truly cold, frigid call that you're making. A warm call could be somebody that's maybe expressed some interest. Maybe they've called you on one of your flyers, or they've seen the video that you pushed on social media, on Facebook, and they've introduced themselves to you. And so now it's a warm type of call. One of the cool things that I'm seeing a lot of, especially some of our top realtors, is doing events. This is seminars. This is doing sponsorships in the community. We just had one of our realtors this weekend do an Easter egg hunt in her community, and she generated a whole bunch of lift in her social channels because she did that. It may look like doing a movie theater buyout for your clients in your database, but doing some type of an event. And maybe right now there's a costing metric that you're concerned about. So do it through Zoom. Just host up a Zoom event where you're going to maybe bring in a mortgage broker, or maybe you're going to bring in a building inspector to go through what does it look like as a buyer to get financed in today's COVID reality world that we're living in. So using events today to generate leads could be an amazing opportunity for folks. I put there in the bottom, CETO them all, come into office. So at this stage, we're not allowing, of course, because of the restrictions, people to meet here in the office, but figure out the best method to actually do that engagement with them so that you can get them in person. Sphere of influences. So this is the core of your business. I call it the gold mine for your buyers, and quite frankly, the gold mine for your sellers. First thing you're going to want to do, we talked about it last week, develop your list. Number two, we're going to segment that list into groups. We talked about this last week as well. We're going to go A+ A, B, C, and D. A plus, these are your folks that are raving about you. These are folks that when they hear somebody talking about real estate, they instantly think about you and want to recommend you on the spot to that person. There doesn't have to be a lot of these folks in your database. There can be 5, there can be 10, there can be 20, because there's each one of those folks is going to know maybe 2 to 3 people every year that want to buy and sell real estate. So let's do some simple math like we did last week. Let's say you've got 10 people in that database. That means that they know 20 to 30 people this year that may buy, sell, or refer real estate. What an opportunity for a hot lead. A hot lead is somebody that's already sold on you, somebody that's going to want to use you because the A plus client that you have has recommended you. The A client is somebody that just needs a little bit of a nudge to become that A plus. Maybe they're a little bit inhibited. Maybe they're a little bit nervous about going out there on a limb for you, but they would go out there on a limb for you. Just stay engaged, follow up, contact with those folks, try and move them up to the A plus. But those are solid people in your database. B's and C's, also good people in your database. Their mission, as I said last week, is to move them up to the next realm, the next category in your segmentation of your list. And the D people are the people that we would put those folks somewhere out to pasture. We'd put them into the delete bin in your inbox or your I think we call it the trash in the inbox. Number 3, qualify. We're going to find out for buyers very quickly before you take them out and show them any property, whether they have the financial capacity or capability to purchase real estate. Because if they don't have that ability or capacity to buy real estate, quite frankly, we're wasting our time. And it may be a person that does have some bad equity or bad credit, and not to abandon those folks because they may be great people. Maybe you put them on a program with somebody that can help them financially to get back in business and get them back on a trajectory to be able to be in a position to have the capability, capacity to buy. If you do that for somebody, can you imagine the amount of referrals that will roll in from that person if you help that person out? So it's not abandoning people that have bad credit. It's working with people that will show you loyalty. And then motivation for buying. Well, I would look at that from a time perspective. We'll talk about that in one of the other slides, how I would break down their immediate motivation, their midterm, long-term motivation to buying. Number 4, create a method of how and at what frequency will you communicate with them. Well, if they're a prospect buyer that wants to buy and it's an immediate or very short-term purchase, I'd be all over those folks. I'd be communicating with them as often as I can so that I'm on their radar constantly. Number 5, develop consistency and habits to maintain and grow. This is what we all do. January 1st, folks, we come up with these great New Year's resolutions, and we're going to put new habits in our lives so that we can have consistency, we can grow and develop how we want in the gym, or we're going to eat healthier. Well, there's no different for us to change the business systems that we have today. It's not easy to do a change like that. If you're doing a 180 change into what I'm proposing that you do here in our course, it's going to take you time to do that. And it's not 30 days, folks. It's probably closer to 90 days. 30 days is just kind of getting you into a routine. It's not really creating a habit. It's going to take you probably 90 days, as I said, to get that consistency and habit in your business. So if you're not getting the results that you're looking for in this course, don't give up. Don't surrender. Keep going. Give yourself that 90 days target, or even 100, 120 days. Believe me, if you do follow this program, or program similar to mine, you will have at the end of this year the results that you want. And number 6 will be measure those results. So the Excel file I gave you last week had a space where you can actually put in a target income, right? So maybe you put in 100,000. Maybe it was 80,000, maybe it's 150, 200, whatever that looks like, that's fine. But at the end of the year, you're going to want to measure what you've accomplished based upon what you projected today or last week in that plan, because it's important for us to be able to track how we've progressed through the course of the year. And if there's tactical changes we have to make through the course of the year to get back on track, because maybe we got led down another track and we ignored the activities and things we need to do every day, then by coming back and measuring the results on an ongoing basis, we can get back to that measurement metric. Next here, open houses. Again, we're not allowed to do that today, folks, but pretend that we're in a world where we can do open houses. My suggestion on open houses is a couple of things. First would be to attend with another realtor. It's not all about folks grabbing clients and taking them out and getting them sold on this property you're doing open house on or something else. It's really about your safety and security, folks, because in open houses, we are vulnerable. That's why I say attend with another realtor, host colleagues, open houses with other colleagues. Because if you're not maintaining your own safety and security, you're, as I said, becoming vulnerable. So what I say here is never turn your back on prospects that are coming through the front door. Always be close to the exits. If you're alone, have regular phone checks with family or a colleague, and be prepared. Be prepared about the property you're doing the open house on. Because if you're prepared, you're gonna be doing 90% more than what other realtors are currently doing at open houses, who do literally just show up a couple minutes before their targeted open house time and open the door, turn some lights on, and walk people through the different rooms. Be prepared. Know what financing looks like on this property. Know what the amenities in the neighborhood look like. What are the schools? What are the shopping? What are the roads like? These types of things are what buyers want. And if you can convey that to people, they're going to say, hey, Mike knows what he's talking about. And this may not be the house for me, but I want a guy like him on my side for finding me the property and the dream home that I'm looking for. So when you're doing your open houses, as I said, be prepared. There's a famous saying from Miguel de Cervantes. He wrote the book Don Quixote, which is the second highest selling book of all times. And he said, "No, be prepared is half the battle." It's almost like Art of War, Sun Tzu. But it's so important for us to be prepared, folks. And it takes time to do that, right? So it's not just running out, doing that open house and executing on 3 hours. It's probably 6 hours worth of work, maybe more, to execute on a 3-hour open house. It's so critical. Internet. Well, 93% of our buyers do some or all of their research on the internet before contacting or speaking with an agent. This is maybe even a higher number now, because even my folks who are almost 80 years old are on the internet now. We've had to guide them on how to use it, but now they're using it all the time. So your internet and how you look on the internet through your website and whatnot has to be professional. Now, to me, it's no different than an online virtual business card, but it's more than that. It's got to have depth to it. It's got to have what I would call this SEO, search engine optimization, and stickiness. You must have a reason to go back to that website. So if you're sitting there and you may not have a website, my recommendation is to look at some suppliers out there. I believe Incom's a good supplier. They're supported by the Mississauga Real Estate Board, and it's a good kind of ready, set, go kind of website. But if you don't have one, I really highly recommend you look into one. And if you do have one, measure it. How good is that search engine optimization? When you type in real estate for your community, your little neighborhood, does your website come up on the first page, second page, or is it on page 15? Because if it's not coming up on the first 1, 2, 3 pages, you're not getting seen. And stickiness, do they have a reason to come back? And so some of these websites have all kinds of things you can turn on, like the news, weather, games. When I used to have my website, I used to have all kinds of games on my site. And when I used to look at my analytics at the end of the month, it was amazing for me to see how many folks came back to play solitaire on my website, or they came and played mahjong on my website. And I didn't care. They were there for 3 hours. They were on my site. And did they look at some listings that I had? Did they look at some stuff? Yeah, they did that too. But they kept on coming to my website, which helped build that search engine optimization for me. So you may want to look into, how do you get your website sticky? Networking. These are what I was, loving the most when I sold real estate. Getting out there, getting to meet people. So it's choosing individualized activities. Maybe golf, running, your hobbies, hockey for me, baseball. maybe volunteering, community options, business conferences, RLP. So every 2 years. Sadly, last year we had to postpone the one we had last year scheduled for Winnipeg. But every 2 years, Royal LePage hosts a national sales conference. These are amazing opportunities to get out there, connect, meet with other realtors across the network from all the other provinces. And when I was selling real estate, every year I got a number of referrals from folks that were in Newfoundland moving to the GTA, or Alberta coming in. Quite frankly, my career as a broker started in 2002 in Halifax at a conference. And that was when I got to meet some of the folks that now run Royal LePage Canada. I didn't, of course, become a broker until 5 years later, but that's where I actually planted my seeds to get into this side of the business that I'm now in. NAR stands for National Association of Realtors. Well, that is a conference that I would say is on steroids. I've gone to a couple of those, and they are insane. There's 25 to 35,000 realtors that attend that conference, and it's done every year. It moves geographically across the United States. It can be in Orlando, San Francisco, Dallas, things like that. But if you want to go for an experience in our business to see cutting edge techniques, strategies, technology, NAR is the place to go. It's well worth the investment, and I recommend, if you're going to stay in our business for a while, do it once. Just humor me. Try it once. You'll be blown away by the experience. Next, there's Realtor Quest. Well, that's hosted by TREB. TREB postponed last year's, or canceled it, of course. This year it's been, I think, postponed to the fall. It may actually be soon to be canceled as well. But this is an annual event that TREB hosts. And we get probably 5 to 8,000 folks that go through Realtor Quest. It's held over at the Metro Convention Center, or Metro Congress Center, over by the airport. Well worth the time, and it's free if you're a member of TREB. The word rebar there shouldn't actually exist. It should say buzz. Rebar used to be what now Buzz essentially is, and this is a GTA-based type of platform where people can connect, and I believe Sam has contributed there as a speaker. Professional groups, there's all kinds of those that are out there. We have a number of our realtors that are actually members of Toastmasters. We have people that are members of the Board of Trade. I'm a member through the Mississauga Real Estate Board. I'm actually the board's representative on the Board of Trade. And politics. I do a lot of government relations. It's fun for me, but you may want to get involved in your local down-to-earth grassroots politics. And I say that today because the volume of what we're hearing for folks that are now talking about a possible capital gains tax on our principal residence is starting to escalate. And so each one of you have in your hands the opportunity and the voice to help our industry. And so getting involved at your local level in politics, your provincial and federal, can help prevent that from happening, because it is a fear of mine that they may introduce something like that to our country. And if it does, you can believe your bottom dollar, I'll be out there fighting against that one pretty hard. Next is the internet network. There we go. Effective buyer closing questions. So we talked about CETO. Come into office. Your goal for each and every buyer is to CETO them. The question I ask, why is it so important for a face-to-face appointment before you start showing them property? Well, it proves that they're serious. They're willing to spend 1 hour or an hour and a half with you to discuss what essentially will be the largest transaction of their life. I can't imagine too many of us would make something, a purchase bigger than that. So, if they can't spend an hour with you or an hour and a half, I would be questioning their seriousness. 2, being legitimate. Like, who are those folks? You want to look at their driver's license. You want to look at their financial, as we said, capability, capacity to buy. We want to look at what their motivation is on a timeline. And number 3, your own safety. Not something you want to take for granted in this business. Sadly, it does happen where realtors are assaulted, where sadly realtors have been murdered. So we don't want that to happen to any of our folks. So we want you to have these face-to-face meetings. Never, ever, folks, just jump in your car and go show a property to somebody without having that face-to-face and qualifying them and engaging them in buyer representation agreement. Of course, here we use our two closes, our sharp close and our alternative choice close. These are the two most powerful closes I can teach you. They were taught to me, as I said, back in the early 90s. And it goes like, if I could, and you fill in the blanks, would you, and you fill in the blanks, combined with the when would be a good time to meet, would 6 or 8 p.m. work better? I really hope people will practice that and consider using that in your day-to-day booking appointments and meeting with your prospects and potential clients. Because if you do use these, just a simple thing, and when you go into your breakout sessions, as Matt will describe that to you later, I really hope that you guys do some of this practicing and drilling and rehearsing of these dialogues, because as I said last week, it's about what to say, how to say it, and when to say it in our business. These are so critical for us to be able to navigate the complexity of what we do, right? It's not simple. People are going to challenge you. They're going to throw objections in your face. And so what do you need to do? Well, you need to develop and practice dialogues and scripts to convert those objections and prospect calls. What I wrote there is the better questions you ask, the higher the likelihood you can convince the buyer to meet with you and ultimately work with you. It's going to enhance who you are. It's going to differentiate yourself from everybody else. Those 60,000 realtors, well, we've already knocked that down to 30 because we know that 50% are not contacting and following up. So we're elevating ourselves above the 30,000 other realtors that exist out there in the marketplace. That's we would call it as your competition. Our next is again about CITO, come into office. I hope I've now burnt that into your brain and that this becomes a mantra for you. And how I used to remember CITO was because I got taught this back in the early 90s, was Cito Gaston was the coach, of course, the Toronto Blue Jays when they won the World Series. So I always thought of Cito Gaston when I had a prospect call. I'm like, well, I got to meet Cito. I got to meet the coach of the Toronto Blue Jays. He's got to come out here to my office and meet with me. And so if that resonates with you and you're in my age bracket where the Blue Jays were a big thing to you and us in the city, think of Cito Gaston when you're trying to get that person into the office. And so what do we need to do? We need to establish why it's imperative for the buyer to meet with you, and that by not doing so, they're making a grave mistake. So you're going to have to come up with those conversations, those dialogues. I gave you a whole bunch of words last week, as we said, where you can use words like opportunity, investment, in your elevator speech in trying to convert them into that appointment with you. Again, in these breakout sessions you're going to be engaging in this week and the following weeks, maybe you practice some of those dialogues with each other. I have a really one of our top realtors in here, former Chairman's Club, kind of floats in between Chairman's and High Red Diamond. Every morning he goes on a call at 7:30 in the morning with 10 realtors from North America. And for half an hour every morning, they practice dialogues and challenging each other. And so, you've got to elevate your game and take your game to that kind of level to be a perfectionist, to be a master of these conversations and dialogues that we're having. Spending a couple of minutes here and there, twice a month is not going to really cut it. You've got to be practicing these things. And I use an analogy as an athlete. A professional hockey player is practicing 3 times the amount of time he's playing. So in a hockey game, there's 3 hours, 2 20-minute periods for 60 minutes. That hockey player is not practicing 60 minutes a day. He's practicing 2 to 3 hours a day to execute on that 60-hour moment in time. And quite frankly, he's only probably playing 20 minutes if he's a top one-line player. So imagine the amount of effort and time that you have to look at putting into your business. And if you're not putting that time in, please, I implore you to do that, because again, it's what to say, how to say it, and when to say it is going to elevate your game and put you into a different category going forward in selling real estate. Traditional advertising. We talk a bit about traditional advertising. It generates a limited response. It's more for image branding than for direct lead generation. A lot of our realtors do have professional branding brochures they've created, done at a cost to some of them where they've outsourced that investment. But it does have a low return on your investment because it's expensive to get that out there compared to the result that you're going to get. On a vendor side, vendors do expect you to do traditional advertising, and that looks like the newspapers and the flyers. I put in the word mega realtors. This is a term that we used to use in the 90s and early 2000s. And there was lots of these mega realtors out there, and there's still some out there today, and you'll see them, maybe on billboards or in the newspapers. And why they do traditional advertising is, primarily ego-driven, I would say, because the response rate on that traditional advertising, and this comes from StatsCan, is a anemic 0.005%. So, that's why we have in our proactive challenge in our ratios there only 0.25% points per flyer, because the response rate on these things is just so low. But if you're going to invest in that, please put together a budget for that so that you know exactly what you're looking at and put a time frame on that. If you're going to go into flyers to generate buyers out of maybe a rental building, put yourself 6 months at least 6 months on delivering this traditional advertising, because the first 2 or 3 months, most of your flyers are not being noticed. They're going into the recycling bin. It's going to take that 6 months before they're like, oh, that I've seen this guy, Mike, because they're only seeing that flyer for a fleeting moment while they're pitching it. And so you need to get that consistency there, which if you look at the cost to deliver that, it's huge to be able to generate that response. So, really focus in on, is this going to work for my business? Do I have the intestinal fortitude and constitution to really invest in this type of lead generation for buyers? Qualifying buyers, again, what is their motivation? And what does that look like? Well, maybe they're a young couple. They have maybe one child with another child on the way, right? So their motivation is they're growing their family. And right now they're living in a small 3-bedroom home. Well, maybe they need now, because of the new child on the way, a larger home to accommodate their growing family. Maybe the motivation is the owner of the home or buyer got a promotion, right? So they're now making more money. So now the motivation for this buyer is to go buy their first property, or for the seller to sell their home and get a bigger property. Maybe they've been relocated. Maybe they've lost their job. There's all kinds of reasons that we have to find out what's the motivation behind these buyers and these sellers. Very important question here next. Are they working with another realtor? This has to be actually one of the very first, if not the very first question we ask anybody that we are in contact with, because it's very important to assess that and identify that at the very earliest stage, at the first stage, because we do not want to be interfering with another realtor's contract, another brokerage's contract. In civil law, that's called inducing a breach of a contract. And it's not only a RICO violation, but it could be a civil violation where somebody could actually take us to court, take yourself to court and sue for any damages they may have incurred. And what would the damage look like? Well, you go and sell a property to the buyer, and the other realtor has lost out on the fee. And so they could either take the option of going to arbitration with us, against us, or into a civil situation. So always work with that question. Are they working with another realtor? One of the additions, which I was so pleased to see on the working with the realtor forms, the buyer agency forms, is there's now a section in there that's highlighted requiring an initial that warrants that the buyer's warranting that they're not under contract with another realtor. In the past, when I was selling, I used to highlight that section and have them initial it, but now it already is highlighted. It's in bold lettering and has an initial. And what I would suggest you do working with your buyers is not only get that contract signed, as I said earlier, but do a follow-up email maybe after your buyer interview where you've got them under buyer contract saying, hey, it was a pleasure meeting with you. Happy, excited, engaged to find you that dream home. Want to just confirm a couple things. We're looking here in Mississauga, we're looking in Oakville and in Georgetown, perhaps in this price range, and confirming that we've gone through the buyer agency agreement. You're not working with another realtor, so that you not only have it on your contract signed, but you now have confirmation by email that you've sent to them to bring that to their attention. So if for whatever reason there may be a buyer agency agreement out there with another brokerage, that we haven't consciously interfered with that whatsoever. We've done everything we can. That buyer in that situation would ultimately then be responsible, bear the responsibility and cost of any litigation for that. Essentially, we're looking for what their needs and wants are. We talked about that. Maybe it's a growing family that they now need a bigger home, or they want to be in a specific school district. These are big things right now. Folks are looking to get into these school districts, or near transportation. This is why you see a lot of these pre-construction condominiums coming along on these lines, the subway lines and transit lines, so that people are able to access where they want, because some folks are moving away from transportation, cars, their own vehicles. So they need these and want these types of things. Qualify before you show any property. We talked about that. Do they have the capability, capacity to buy property? Try to confront any challenges that they may have proactively, which is beforehand, right? So you don't want to allow something to erupt in the middle of what you're doing. So what I suggest is to do when you do your interview, you go through some of the things that they may encounter along the way. So we talk about challenges in a building inspection. Maybe there's work that needs to be done in a home. So we talk about that proactively before we actually encounter that, so that when it does happen or may happen, that they're already prepped for that. In your buyer interview, you're going to set the tone and rules. And what I brought today was an example of what I used to use in qualifying buyers. So in my CITO, they'd come into to the office, and I had always, call it 10, 15 of these things pre-made, so that I wasn't scrambling, because I had the system. I wasn't scrambling to make something up, because today at 11 o'clock I got a phone call from somebody that wanted to meet or I could meet with them tonight at 6 o'clock, and now I'm trying to struggle to prepare something like this. And so this workbook was kind of my handover to them to show them this is what we're going to do. And so it comes with and it came with a whole bunch of things. Some 10 deadly mistakes you can make in real estate. It comes with the work in the realtor form. They used to have a relationship with the brick. Have a blank copy of the buyer agency agreement, statistics. And then what you see here is the agenda. So when I met with folks, it was a real meeting. It wasn't just a come on over and have a cup of coffee. This was a real meeting. I wanted them to feel like the hour or hour and a half that they were investing me was worth their while. So the agenda, and I'll just throw these things out to you, would be number one, do they have the financial capability and capacity to purchase? That's qualifying them. Number two, going through the agency, the working with the realtor, the buyer agency agreement. We just chatted about that. I would describe to them what I actually do, the searching on the MLS system. Now we could belong to TREB, of course, we can belong to one of the Order Sports. So I'd explain to them the differences of what I do and what they do probably every day by going to realtor.ca. A lot of folks believe realtor.ca is the system that we're accessing. And of course, you want to educate them to the fact that that's not the case, that we're actually getting a lot more data, including all the historical data. We want to give them actually a copy of the agreement of purchase and sale and any other forms up front. So I want them to take that home. I want them to look at, that 6-page document that's called the agreement of purchase and sale. I don't want them worried about signing that tomorrow night or next week when we're in a multiple offer situation. There's 10 offers, and I got to sit down and pull that document out and go through that document with them where they're already nervous. They found their dream home and they're terrified. There's emotions are running rampant, and now they see the 6-page document. So highly, highly recommend that you give them a copy of a blank agreement of purchase and sale. Go through what that looks like. So we're going to fill in some blanks with that. We're going to fill in your name. We're going to fill in the seller's name, the address, the deposits, the purchase price, of course, and any of the conditions are irrevocable. all these good things. So, but we want to get that in their hands at that very first meeting so that when they go home, whether they look at that agreement purchase and sale or not, and some will, some are very analytical, some will go through that and call you and ask you questions on that. But for the vast majority of the folks that don't do that, there's a peace of mind that they have knowing that you gave them that copy. So there's nothing that you could be hiding, and there's nothing that's going to surprise them when it comes time for you to actually do the offer with them. Talking about inspections or conditions, we want to talk about what conditions are. What's the purpose of condition? What's the time limit that we're looking for? What is this thing called good faith? So when we put a condition in an agreement, we were putting that in good faith that we're going to actually attempt to satisfy that condition legitimately. So, you know, I hear often, oh, I've got a condition in there on financing, and we're going to walk and we're going to use that as a get out of the offer condition. Well, hang on, it may not be as easy as that. The seller may say, well, I don't think you acted in good faith. We negotiated that offer last night. We agreed at 10 p.m. and now at 10 a.m. in the morning next day, you're telling me you can't get your financing. I don't really believe that. And so now there becomes a bit of a problem. So we want to go through these things beforehand, before we're actually really doing one, so that we're proactively confronting any challenges. Talk about my agenda. Hang it, hold up there so you can see it as well. Meeting with a lawyer, talking about the lawyer. What is the lawyer doing for you? Are they meeting when they're meeting with you to sign you up to do title transfer? All these good things. So we want to talk a little bit about that. Purchase costs. We're going to look at the various fees. And so you may want to set up something where, and there's all kinds of online tools we can use. What are the CMHC fees going to look like based upon their down payment? What are the land transfer tax costs? Of course, if we're trading in Toronto proper, we have a double land transfer tax. So these are important things that we want to put on the table very early, first meeting with those buyers, so that your job when you're out there on the street is made a lot easier. Because if you're not, you're just going to get used by a lot of buyers, and you're going to be what I say in the bottom. Do not become an Uber driver or a taxi service to buyers, because the big difference between you, an Uber driver, and a taxi service, well, those two folks are getting paid for driving folks around or for taking folks around to show properties. We're not getting paid to do that. Always, always, always get the buyer agreement signed. So I keep this book in my office. I have on occasion lent it out to folks. It's got to come back to me. This is means a lot to me. I used to use that 15 odd years ago, and it's a pretty cool document. And every one of my buyers would get this. This is a closing cost analysis I used to use on an Excel file. And they went home. This is the agreement purchase sale. Buyers analysis, informed buyers. They went home with something tangible that I gave them, and they felt that this meeting that I had with them for an hour and a half was worthwhile. And believe it, way more than what most realtors are providing to their clients at this stage. Next slide, we got motivation. What is their reason for buying? Kind of chatted about that already. It could be the addition of a new child on the way, could be a promotion, a job relocation, could be all kinds of things for their motivation or job loss. Are they currently homeowners or renters? Good, important question to ask, right? Because if they're homeowners, well, there's two transactions perhaps on the table for you. A lot of people will use the two transactions to negotiate the listing down. Next week, we'll talk about the listing presentation. I'll go through why and how I would manage that and how I deal with that. Determine if they're only researching the market. And so you want to find out, like, are they just here trying to figure out what's happening in the economy? They're reading all this information out there. There's so much noise in the media, on TV, on newspapers, and they're just out there researching the market, and they're not really bona fide buyers. Because you only want to invest your time in prospects that want to and are able to financially be in position to purchase a property. Again, classify them into appropriate category: A+, A, B, C's, and D's. Working with a realtor, that's the form that we use. Really just going to high level glance over this, but this is a a mandatory document that we need to have signed by the consumer, the client. Why? Because it establishes the fact that you've had the conversation to them about the different forms of relationship that they can have with you, right? It could be a client relationship, it could be a customer. There's also talk about the multiple presentation aspect of it. So this is a mandatory form. Folks, again, I'll tell you, put this out in the very first meeting you have with people. Whether you get them to sign it immediately right there and then is up to you. My recommendation would be, yes, do that. The longer you procrastinate and wait, the more difficult it's going to be, the more awkward it is to ask to get them to sign that, to tidy up the paperwork. But you know, I would absolutely be trying to get these documents signed before they walk out the door, because you definitely want to not be going back to them and asking them to sign it. Needs and wants. We talked about you know, why they could need or want to buy real estate. Well, we're looking at property type. What's the size? What kind of finishings are they looking for? Is it curb appeal important? Some cultures have numbers that are important to them. So these are types of things that you're going to want to establish with them. We talked about neighborhood before. We talked about schools, the shopping, the recreation, the access to public transit, these types of things. What are their price range? What's their time frame? Here's a question that I would always ask in my buyer interviews. What is more important to you, Mr. or Mrs. Buyer? Is it getting the property you want, or is it getting a bargain? And you can only pick one, Mr. or Mrs. Client. You can either pick, I only want a bargain, or I only want the property that I really want. There's no, you get both of these in this scenario, this question. It's let's pretend you can only answer one of them. Most people will decide, and in my experience anyways, it's the property that they want, the one that matches all their needs and wants versus a bargain. And so you set the tempo and expectation at that meeting before you're out on the street, because then when they're house hunting, then this aspect of I want a bargain, I want a deal, I want to buy something cheap. You know, we're using the word economical instead, but you know, they want to buy the property they want, because that's the property that they're going to be there for 5, 10, 15, 20 plus years, you know, building memories, growing families there. So great question to ask everyone in your buyer interviews. What is more important, Mr. or Mrs. Buyer? Is it getting the property you really want, or getting a bargain? You can only pick one in this scenario. Buyer policies. Determine when and where to meet. Well, as I said before, CETO is the way to go. Today, we're going to have to adapt that. We're going to do Zoom. We're going to do maybe FaceTime. Maybe we're going to go to an environment where it allows us to socially distance to meet with people. So we want to determine when and where that looks like. Take charge and set the narrative. Well, this is the personal buyer presentation package. This will set the narrative. This will put you in control. We also have, by the way, from Signature, we have our own little booklets that we produce for you in our design centers. I would be using these as a 1-2 punch, right? So if you ever want to come in and have a look at what I've prepared, by all means, you're more than welcome to do that. But at the very least, use what we produce for you. It's free. All you need to provide is a name and potential the address, and we produce this for you free of charge. But at least it gets you putting the narrative where you're directing it and you're taking control. Because you're going to want to have that prospect walk out of that meeting going, holy cow, I learned so much in that last hour and a half with Mike, and he's the guy that I want to use as my go-to realtor to purchase my next dream home. Tracking system. So we talked about A pluses, A, Bs, and Cs. Here's a little bit of a modification on this, drilling down to specific buyers here. Classify the buyers by motivation and time. So an A buyer will buy now. A B buyer will be buying in 3 to 6 months. A C buyer will buy in 6 months or more. I didn't put a D. A D buyer will never buy. That's just the reality there. So classify them as A, B, C. Buying now, which is 0 to call it 3 months. B, 3 to 6 months, and C, 6 months or more. This is going to help you in your staying in contact with these folks so that you can stay on top of them. Further classify by source. Where does that look like? Well, where did they come from? Did you generate them at that open house? Did you generate that by a referral from your database? Did it come from a post that you made on social media and they made a comment and all of a sudden you generated a lead? Once you identify the source, put them into your CRM system, whatever that looks like for you, whatever system you're using, put them in that program. And then create a campaign to connect with them. I've got 18 to 24 times a year. That's truthfully what I used to do in my career, but I would be suggesting you want to do probably 30 to 36 in this new kind of digital world that we're living in. So there's all these other options that weren't available to me, but you're going to want to connect, as I said, because it's that follow-up, and it's that, as we said in the first couple of slides, people don't buy the first time they see you, the second, the third, fourth. It's the 5th to 12th to 24th time that they connect with you that they're going to buy with you. So you're going to stay in touch with them on whatever campaign and CRM system you're going to be using. Contact system. So again, establishing the frequency of contact. That's situation dependent. If they are a C on your timeline, which is 6 months or later, well, you're not going to contact them every day, twice a day. You're probably going to contact them once a week or maybe twice a week in that situation, while you're warming them up and you're cultivating and kind of triaging them to become that B and C time, which is 3 to 6 months or immediate purchasing. Establish the method you want to contact them. Me personally, I was always an in-person guy. I didn't mind, getting my car and driving out and getting that face-to-face interaction happening. It's a little bit difficult to do that in our world today. So the phone, email, text, mail, and our video platforms today are going to be able to intercede and help you there. This matching tool that we have in MLS, it's a great system. However, if I was working with a hot prospect myself, I'd be constantly checking the MLS system, getting those reminders sent to me from Treb as immediately as I can, because I want to be able to communicate to my buyer the moment something comes on the market, so that we have the opportunity to get out there and have a look at the property and put our offer in on the property, possibly doing a preemptive if that's available in the listing world that we're living in. Market conditions, high level here. There's basically 3 of them, right? So we have a buyer's market. That's when supply of property exceeds demand. Well, folks, we're definitely not in that marketplace here in the GTA. Buyers have more time to shop in that environment. There's more negotiating leverage we have. And what does that look like? That's an inventory where there's 4 months of or more inventory available to the buyer. We have probably 3 weeks worth of inventory at this stage. A seller's market. Well, buyers exceed supply of property available. That's where we are. Buyers have to make decisions quickly, submit firm offers. Inventory is 2 months or less. As I said, we're under probably 3 weeks or 4 weeks right now. Hence the reason why they have to make quick decisions, why they may have to submit firm offers, is doing this meeting with them, getting them on board, providing them with the education so that they're prepared in that environment where you have to be nimble, you have to be quick, you have to be able to execute professionally with these people so they have the confidence and faith in what they're doing with you, making this largest purchase, that there's no doubt in their mind that it's a real decision. Because we find not every day, but once a week, we'll get a question out there where a buyer's woken up the next morning. They've won the offer presentations the night before, and they've woken up and they've had a regret. They've regretted the decision. Now, unless there is a clause, and this is a little bit of a joke from myself to you, unless you put a clause in there that the buyer has a get out of the contract because they woke up with a regret statement in the agreement, they've bought that property firm. And it's going to be really difficult to unwind that situation, because if the seller doesn't want to unwind that situation from you, your buyer has bought that firm. And so there's legal consequences to that. By doing the meeting with them, by having an agenda, by providing the information and educating them, they're going to be hopefully making those purchases with a proper sound decision in their mind, where they're not going to wake up the next morning with any regrets. A balanced market. This market would be where the properties that are available are equal to the buyer's demand. And so, we've been kind of transitioning back and forth between a seller buyer's market, but we would be well served probably with a balanced market. And
that may actually be occurring slowly in some of the marketplaces that we're looking at right now, where we're noticing a bit of a consolidation occurring, where there is now a bit of a balance. But on the whole, we're still in a seller's market currently across the GTA. Showing property. This is just the basic stuff of what you do. Probably most of us here are experts in this, but know your neighborhood stats, right? So if you're going to be traveling in your car with folks, you're going to want to know what's generally happening in the area. You know, there's been 5 sales in the last 6 months in this area, or there's only been 1 sale in this area in the last year, meaning nobody likes to leave here because it's that good of a neighborhood. So, you know, this house is going to get a lot of demand. So, but know those stats. If you have the time, try and inspect the properties you are showing. Of course, in the COVID world, we're stacking appointments, and so there's no opportunity really for us to inspect. But in a world post-COVID, if you have the opportunity to pre-inspect properties before you show them, I'd highly recommend it. Be familiar with comparable properties. So just do a quick search to see what has been listed that's comparable to the one you're showing, or has comparably sold recently, so that you can share that information. When you're showing properties, always be early, and I say appropriately attired. So I've many times watched realtors show up in flip-flops and shirts and ripped shirts and shorts and things like that. And that's cool, I guess, if we're selling up in cottage country. But you know, my recommendation would be here in the GTA is we'd be properly attired and definitely early. People do not like people that are late. I've seen so many realtors lose clients because they were habitually late to an appointment. So please be early. Freehold properties, know how to access the property, lockbox, security systems. You know, we all know this stuff. I just throw it up there as a simple reminder, especially with security systems. You know, sometimes we trigger them and we don't like that. You know, stay with your buyers at all times. Don't let them go free range. You're going to want to stay with them. And in the world we're living in right now, you have to be wearing this mask in the house. If we're not wearing the mask in the house, and for instance, let's say they have some home security, they see that, there's a RICO complaint going to happen, and sadly, you know, we will not be on the positive end of the result of that. We've experienced that already here at the brokerage. So please, when you're doing your showings, I know it's an aggravation. It's hard to, you know, get facial expressions and features, but wear the mask while you're showing, folks. Leave the property as you found it. That's turning off all the lights, locking the doors that were locked. And if they have pets, making sure the pets didn't escape. And when I teach this class live, I always tell the story about me being up in north of Bolton on a few acres property I showed, and they had a warning there was pets there, and I opened the door, and these 2 cats, one went over my shoulder, one went below my legs, and they took off into this 2-acre property. Well, a few hours later, I managed to get them back in the house. I had to cancel all my other appointments. So, you know, if there's pets in a property, learn from me. You know, make sure that you leave the pets in the house or you get them back in. It wouldn't be a good call to get where, you know, we've let a pet out of the house there. Condominiums, know how to access the properties. Condos are very specific. You know, people are buying them for a lifestyle typically. So how do you even get into the property? Through security, the car key access, things like that. When you get to a condominium, some of you may not know this, but I'm just reminding you guys, the concierge or security have the right to ask us and have us show them not just the digital copy. I keep one on my phone, but the actual hard copy paper registration of our RICO license. They have the right to prohibit our access if we don't have that. And I've often gotten calls from our realtors that didn't know that. So just throwing that as a reminder, you may not have known that yourself. Always keep a paper copy in your wallet or your purse of your RICO registration in the event that you are asked to show it. Lockbox, oh God, I've seen pictures on some of these Facebook realtor groups where there's like 50 lockboxes. If you're listing a condo and you want to help buyers find yours, you know, put something on it, you know, paint it red, or put a ribbon on it, or put your business card on. Do something that puts your lockbox out there. It's only going to be helpful to your buyer agents that are out there buying. and showing your property. Parking, where's the parking? If it's underground parking, go and look at the parking spot, identify where it is, because it might actually, from a buyer's perspective, be a really good feature. Hey, it's like 20 feet away from the elevator. So when I'm lugging my groceries in, I don't have to walk, from one end of the parking lot to the next. If it's above ground parking, well, know where that is as well. How far away is it to the doors to get in? So when you're showing properties in condominiums, I know these are some basic things we're talking about here, but I find it to be important just as a reminder to check these things out, because as the guy that actually sees the court cases and the complaints, I do deal with probably 2 or 3 of these a year where we've bargained and negotiated for an underground parking space to find that the parking space was outside, or we bargained for first floor parking to find out we're on the 3rd level of parking or whatnot. So actually take the time to go out and work and walk the actual property to find where the parking is. Amenities, well, that's if they have a pool, if they have a spa, a rec center, a workshop, these types of things. That's why people are typically buying condos, is for those types of amenities. See whether or not you're able to access them and be able to show them, because it's something that the buyer is looking for. This is what their decision to buy this in this particular condo may be about. Ensure you have access and time to show those features, right? So don't go and book for a condo, 5-10 minute showings because you got 5 of them in the building. Stagger them out, give yourself enough time so you can access all these features to show the buyers. Realtor safety, have to impress this upon everybody, not just our ladies that are watching here, but men as well. Never, ever, folks, ever meet an unknown buyer at a vacant property or any property alone. Bring a buddy, bring your spouse, your husband, your wife along with you. Always keep your phone charged and with you. Park your car, folks, in a well-lit area and lock it. You don't want anybody getting into the backseat of your car and surprising you as you leave. In fact, this morning I read a story on Real Estate Hacks about a realtor that had been the last couple of days robbed. They had followed him in his vehicle and waited for him to park, and then broke into his car. Now, it wasn't while he was showing properties or anything, but just to be vigilant and maintain that air of safety for yourself, so that there's no commission, as I always say, there's no commission worth your safety or risking your health to make. So always bring a buddy if you're meeting somebody new at a property first. If you've listened to my stories today or our presentation, I don't even advocate that. It's come into the office, it's meet them before, so we can identify these folks. Just don't go run out and show them properties. Please remember that. After showing procedures, after you've shown the property or properties to the buyer, here's a question that I advocate you ask. It's what I used to ask them all the time: what they thought and felt about the home after every showing. Like, what's their thoughts here? Was it too big, too small? They didn't like the location. They didn't like the upgrades. What did they feel about the home? Could you see yourself living here, raising your family? Could you see yourself cooking in that kitchen? Can you see yourself enjoying the maybe theater room downstairs? So what did they think and feel about the home? And as they start to share with you those thoughts, those feelings, you're going to start to map out in your mind and being able to narrow down exactly what they're looking for. It's going to help you better serve them going forward. I always used to ask this question too: would you consider making an offer on this property? Why or why not? Again, it's going to elicit some information that you can now store in the back of your mind about what they're really focusing in on, and helping them narrow down exactly what they're looking for. And here's a bit of advice: never leave an appointment without having something to follow up or give to the prospect later, as it allows you permission to get back in touch with them. So it could be something as simple as checking out what the utilities look like every month for this family that has 3 kids, and you have 3 kids with your buyers here, and they want to know, hey, what's the hydro going to look like? What's the gas bill going to look like? And so, listen, I'll find out about that and I'll get back to you. And it's a reason for you to get back, and it opens that door for a conversation. Your homework, folks. So here's what I'd say: prepare and practice your buyer presentation. Prepare a buyer kit. This took me a long time to put together, but once I did, part of that systematizing my business, they were on the shelf and I booked an appointment, I grabbed one. Like I said before, I always had 10 or 15 of these things tailor-made, ready to go, right off the shelf to meet with these buyers. Prepare one. The time that you're going to invest in this for the byproduct and the benefit down the road for you, it's immeasurable. It'll differentiate you. It'll make you look more professional and be more organized, keep you on track, keep you out of trouble. If you ever had to go to RICO, you ever had to go to court, hey, listen, this is what I do with every one of my buyers, Mr. Judge or Mr. RICO investigator. I have all this stuff. Oh, and by the way, if you want to talk to my last 10 buyers to see whether or not I went over working with a realtor, whether I talked about buyer agency agreement and the various, fiduciary responsibilities I have, call any one of those folks because I run a system, just like McDonald's. Determine what those systems will be. Work your plan. But most importantly, folks, have fun in this business. When I was, an athlete, I was always asking my teammates, are you guys having fun? Because it didn't look like we were having fun today. I know we lost, but are you having fun? Because if you're not having fun, what are you here for, right? We want to have fun. We want to make a little bit of an income here. We had all those reasons why we got into the business. We talked about the very first thing, in fact, last week. We want to be able to identify these whys and have fun doing them, because if it's not fun doing this, folks, we got to figure out how to make it fun. Because if it's not going to be fun, every day is going to be a grind, and we don't want that to be your careers. What we have here is just some of the snapshots from the back of the book, buyer consultation questionnaires. I recommend you go through these things. There's all kinds of scripts here that we provided for you in the course that you can practice these dialogues that, as I said, if you want to start practicing them in these breakout groups that we're going to introduce here momentarily, this would be fantastic, because let me go back to it, folks. It's what to say, how to say it, and when to say it. The dialogues, the conversations that you need to perfect to effectively work with clients, work with customers, clients, to make yourself the differentiated realtor that you want to be. So these are the dialogues here. Matt, are you listening in still?
Yeah, I'm here.
Matt's there.
Yep, you can hear me.
So Matt, if you could help us in regards to these breakout rooms. And what we're going to do with these breakout rooms, folks, is I think Matt's already assigned some of these, if I'm not mistaken. We're going to assign you to these rooms. You'll get into these rooms and you'll pick a team captain, for instance, somebody that's going to hold each other accountable. And maybe there's co-captains, because there's a couple of you want to run as a mentor leader in that group. But we're going to get these groups going so that you guys can hold each other to the fire, so you can pick each other up, you can motivate people, inspire people, because really this is a great community that we have here at Signature. There's so much talent here. There's a depth of knowledge for each and every one of you that is exceptional, that you can help somebody else, and that person may help somebody else, and it might come back to you full circle. So Matt, I'll leave it up to you to take it over. I got to stop the recording here, and I don't know how I do that. I'll hit stop share, I guess. And I hit right there.